Communities.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome, Mr. Secretary. When it comes to the administration's financial regulatory plan, not unlike their trillion-dollar health care plan, it will prove to be terribly expensive and lead to forms of rationing. First, the administration's proposal rewards regulators with sweeping new draconian powers like the CFPA to regulate industries as diverse as car rental companies, advertising agencies, and neighborhood department stores, all of which will simply make credit more expensive and less available to struggling small businesses and American families throughout our nation. The administration proposal also includes the designation of certain companies as Tier 1 financial holding companies. The administration's proposal, I fear, will simply codify the policy of too big to fail and enshrine us as a bailout nation. Now, some maintain that bailouts have brought us to the verge of a recovery. I hope and pray we are on the verge of a recovery, but I remind all, Mr. Chairman, there is no such thing as a jobless recovery. No jobs, no recovery. Since the administration has taken office and enacted their economic agenda, 3 million more of our countrymen have lost their jobs, and we currently suffer under the highest unemployment rate in a quarter of a century. The administration's continued bailouts of Fannie, Freddie, AIG, Chrysler, GM, and the list goes on, have hampered our economic recovery and helped our nation pass a very important milestone, the first $1 trillion deficit in our history, not to mention a budget which will triple the national debt over the next 10 years. There's a huge difference between adding emergency liquidity to a panicked financial system and bailing out firms fortunate enough to be designated too big to fail. Under the latter policy, the big get bigger, the small get smaller, the taxpayer gets poorer, and our children get saddled with the mother of all debts. Clearly, reforms are needed, but the best way to end taxpayer bailout of failed companies is to simply end taxpayer bailouts of failed companies. The best way to protect consumers is with competitive markets, vigorous enforcement of anti-fraud laws, and effective disclosure that is easily understood. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
The gentleman